All right. So we're going to go over a few different types of functions. These are sort of like properties that functions can have. So you might want to think about it that way. These are properties that some functions can have. Not every function is going to have one of these properties. Some functions will have none of these, but these are some, vocab terms that we're going to want to know about. So the first one, a function f from a to b is called surjective. If, which by the way can also be said by saying f maps a onto b. So surjective is also sometimes referred to as onto. And what it means is that f of a equals b. Now what's that? This is saying that the range equals the codomain. So the second example in the previous video was an example of a surjective function where the range is the entire codomain. You can think of this as basically meaning that none of the possible outputs are left out. All of the elements in the codomain are mapped to by something in the domain. So that's surjective. The next one is called injective. A function f is called injective, which also sometimes referred to as one-to-one, which is a term you may remember from algebra class. You actually learned about this back in algebra, like college algebra. And this is if whenever two inputs produce the same output, so like f of a1 equals f of a2, it's the case that those inputs must have actually been the same. Okay, so if two inputs give you the same output, it must have actually been the same input each time. So it wasn't really two inputs, it was really one input, is the point there. An equivalent way to state that, which might be a little easier to think about, is if you have two different inputs, right? If the two inputs are not equal to each other, well, then that guarantees that the outputs are also not equal to each other. Okay, and these are equivalent to each other. These are really stating the same exact thing, and they're equivalent because they're contrapositives. So I just want to point that out. It's just the same statement, but one of them is the contrapositive of the other. So they're equivalent to each other. Okay, so that's injective. This is like, you may remember talking about the horizontal line test for algebraic functions. That's one-to-one. That's injective. All right, so the last word to know is bijective, or in other words, a bijection. Okay, and that just means basically both. Okay, it is injective and surjective. Okay, so if it's both of those things, we call it a bijection, or we call it bijective function. Okay, so there's our vocab words. Now we're gonna, in the next video, go over an example coming soon.